Hello, everybody. I have my friend Sherry Perry here. I have searched her out because of the questions you've been asking inside our group. Sherry Perry is what do you call yourself, Sherry?
I'm an educational consultant, educational advocate.
She's American. So this is for my American friends who have been asking questions about what to do with school issues. I want to give you a quick flash here. This is Sherry's business, the Perry Educational Consultants. Sherry is now a member of our Facebook group and she is here for you. So based on the questions that you all have been asking inside the group, um, that I can't answer as a former Canadian teacher, I want to make sure that you have access to the people that you need to get your questions answered. Welcome, Sherry.
Having me, Erin. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. Nice to meet everybody.
Okay, so the biggest question that I've been watching and seeing inside the group has to do with advocating for IEPs and 504s. And I don't I don't know what an American IEP looks like, and I don't know what a 504 is. I'm confused. Some people are asking which one's best. Do you need one, the other, both? And so I have invited you here to clarify for everyone and also to make everyone aware that you are available to answer more specific questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's a very common question that we get. And so both are federal laws and both entitle students to certain protections. And the short answer is it really depends. It's very individual, client, child, adolescent specific. So please feel free to reach out and ask if you want to know about a particular child. But so I can speak in generality. So in general, the biggest difference between an IEP and a 504 is specialized instruction. So a 504 plan is going to give someone the protections of accommodations. And those can be classroom and instruction accommodations or testing accommodations, both. And so both plans, both a 504 plan and an IEP, have those same accommodations. In an IEP, we would call those supplementary aids and supports. The biggest difference is that when a student qualifies for an IEP, an individualized education program, it's built differently and it provides specialized instruction. So, if an individual, for example, there's a lot of executive functioning needs, right? So, we have a lot of individuals that have a primary disability of ADHD. So, when you have a 504 plan, if a student is able to demonstrate what they know through accommodation, for example, some general accommodations might be preferential seating, breaking assignments down into smaller chunks, extended time, repeated directions, help with organization. Those are accommodations. And so, if by some of those simple accommodations, but effective accommodations, you see a student or an adolescent able to complete work, able to hand work in, not necessarily perfect, but better than they were doing before, and you've collected data and you see that it's working, then those accommodations are working. And so that can be, you go through the whole eligibility process, and I can discuss that further. But if those accommodations are not working, you can go to and request what's called a child find meeting. And a child find is a federal law that entitles families to come together with a school team. And that's a school psychologist, a special educator, a general educator, and the family or guardians, and have a dialogue about whether the identified disability is having an impact to the extent that it requires specialized instruction. And that could be in the general education setting, that could be outside of the general education setting. But it's goals specifically instructed and measured.
So that's when you move to an IEP.
Correct.
And so that means You have one or the other, not both.
Correct. That's a great question. One or the other, not both.
And are you supposed to start with one or the other? Like, how do you determine which is the first one? How do you do that? How do you know?
Really, it's another really good question. And again, I wish I could give you, it's definitely this and it's definitely this. And I think it really depends. I will tell you that it's an interesting thing. And I think one of the most important takeaways is to be familiar with the law. So these are federal laws. And so it's important to do a little research, or you could ask a professional, but to understand what the process is in your local education agency. Um, Child Find is a wonderful place to start. So Child Find bears equal responsibility on school teams, local education agencies, and families to report that there is a suspected disability. So we're going to go back very quickly to ADHD. So ADHD is a medical diagnosis. So you go to your pediatrician, you can get scales filled out, and you have this diagnosis. Now you've got this piece of paper. What do I do? Right? And so you can approach a school team and ask for a child find meeting. That is within your legal rights. Within a certain number of days, a local education agency is required by law to convene a meeting. It's never a bad place to start, because even if your child does not qualify for an individualized education program, you still made the team aware of these concerns, because what can happen is that team may refer you to a 504 process. You'll put a 504 plan in place. But what if those accommodations at some point aren't as effective? You've made the team aware that you have these issues, and then you can reschedule and come back to a child find meeting.
And talk about an IEP at that point?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, okay. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you're talking about ADHD with your little paper. This also applies to autism.
It applies absolutely to autism. Yes, definitely. Because
Okay.
autism is a diagnosis. Just because you have a diagnosis of autism doesn't necessarily mean that you need an individualized education program or an IEP.
Yes.
Accommodations might meet who your child is as a learner.
Okay. This is very different than in Canada. So I am super appreciative of your explanation and your help for the people in the group that I can't support. This is amazing. So so is okay, here's another question. Is one better than the other?
The ultimate question.
Right?
No, it depends on what your child needs. And I'll tell you, it's really interesting. I am working with a few families right now who have young children who have an initial diagnosis of autism, having these exact conversations. And um, one little girl that I'm working with is 5, and she's really responding well to the accommodations that are in place in her classroom. Now, she happens to be in a really structured classroom. This is the teacher that every parent wishes their child had, K through 12,
Okay,
right?
so just let me ask there. Does
Go
she have
ahead.
504?
Yes.
Not an
So
IEP. She has
not an
a
IEP.
504. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So she has a 504 plan. So these accommodations that are being put in place. Now, she also, right now, she's in kindergarten. So we're not seeing academic impact. Inherently in kindergarten, things aren't timed.
Right.
You know, a lot of these barriers that you might see as she gets older aren't present right now. So she's got that dream teacher. It's a relatively small class, and there's a lot of structure in place. So the accommodations through her 504 plan are exactly what she needs. But we're collecting data and we're keeping an eye on her. I have another student who's in first grade who's having a very different experience. So we've
Okay.
had through a 504 plan, we've had accommodation, but she's now starting to elope from her environment. She's starting to demonstrate more dysregulated behaviors. Well, what's happening? The environment is not as structured, and there's more academic demands being placed on her. So, not that she can't meet those demands, but what it's looking like, and we have a child find meeting scheduled for later today. We're going to have this discussion, is that she's needing more specialized instruction in order to demonstrate what she knows rather than the accommodations. The accommodations are no longer sufficiently meeting her
So
needs.
so child number 2 has a 504 that's not meeting her needs, so you go back to child find and you talk about, an IEP where she may require some specialized instruction so that she can access the curriculum.
Correct. And so the goals, interestingly enough, are probably not going to be academic focused, right? So we did all new evaluations, we have that academic data, and she's either meeting or exceeding age level benchmarks. She's a bright little girl, but she is not engaging in her day. So there, about 50% of her day is now being spent outside of the classroom because she is emotionally dysregulating. She's struggling with her peers. She's struggling with the environment. And so what it seems as if, and again, we let the data do the talking and we're going to go through the process, but it feels like she's going to need more specific interventions, more direct instruction about what to do in those moments so that she can fully access the curriculum.
And so then child number 1, who is having a great year in kindergarten, may not have a great year in grade 1 when she transitions to a place that's going to require her to perform differently.
Correct.
So are you just going to like is this like a wait and watch thing, or do you anticipate what she's going to need? Like how does that work?
Great question. So here's the big problem. We can't predict.
Right.
So we can't write any document based on what we think might happen.
Okay.
And so one of my golden rules is, and I'm going to give this one away because I'm a big believer in it. Before you leave one meeting, you schedule the next one.
Nice.
That's my bare minimum requirement. And it could be 6 months. But if we're collecting data and we're evaluating whether that data, the strategies are working, right? So we want to measure the efficacy of what we're doing. We might need 6 to 8 weeks till we come back, but that's okay. We'll give ourselves 6 to 8 weeks. So we have everybody at the table. Let's get out our calendars. We've decided we're going to come back in 6 to 8 weeks and we're going to have this discussion to see whether it's working or not. So I always have the next meeting scheduled.
That is such good advice. I love what people share in this group, Sherry. This is
Yeah,
the best. Thank you for that. I feel like we take care of each other in this group, and I love that you're part of it now. So that
thank
we,
you. I appreciate that.
yeah,
So here's something else that's important. Again, it's not private information, but something it's really important. If you have a student, especially a student on the spectrum, whose behaviors are becoming that outward manifestation. So are they biting? Are they hitting? Are they calling out? Language that's uncomfortable for others. And sometimes that happens. There's another assessment that you can ask for. It's called the functional behavioral assessment. And so what you do is you collect data on these behaviors and you're looking at antecedents. What is the behavior? And then are any of the consequences having impact or not? And so it's a regimented process. There's questions, and every local education agency does it a little differently, but you can look it up. FBA, we love a good acronym in special education. So FBA for short. And the goal is to determine the root cause of the behavior. So it's important to understand, especially for students on the spectrum, right? Communication disability, what might be the root cause of the behavior. And then you hypothesize the why. So you usually look, what is the student seeking? What is the student avoiding? And then do you have enough data to then develop a behavior intervention plan? And so what are the adults going to do around that child to support that child? And I want to be very clear. A student does not need to have an individualized education program, an IEP, in order to get an FBA. So in the United States, it is oftentimes something that people think is only special ed, but it's not. So even if you don't even have a 504 plan, you can ask for functional behavioral assessment.
Wow, that is so good to know. So you could have a 504 and an FBA.
Yes,
You could have an IEP and an FBA, but you can't have all three.
correct.
Okay, I
Yes,
got it.
yeah. And again, even if, let's say you are in the beginning stages, and so what we're seeing right now perhaps are just interfering behaviors, and you're just collecting data, you can ask for a functional behavioral assessment. You can ask the team to start collecting data that's specific around those interfering behaviors.
So you could do that even before the 504 or IEP. You could just
Yes,
have the FBA. Okay,
yes.
this is fascinating and so helpful. I think that you have cleared up so many misconceptions for people. Thank you. This
My
is
absolute pleasure.
okay. So, is there anything else that you think that families should know right now?
Yes, one last bit of information.
Okay.
If right now you are attending a private school, which many families are, especially in the early stages, you can still request all of these supports through your local education agency. So let's say I'm in right now, Bethesda, Maryland, and my local education agency is Montgomery County Public Schools. But my daughter goes to private school, but I suspect there's an educational disability. I can go to my home school of assignment based on my address and request for a full evaluation. I can request a child find meeting. I can request a 504 meeting. And so you can go through the whole process. It's free. You are a taxpayer. You are entitled to that service. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so even if you choose to keep your child in private school, you can get what's called a service plan that will provide support, certain supports, not all services, through
Okay.
your local education agency while your
Okay.
child is enrolled in private school.
So, is that assuming that it either costs a lot of money to do through the private school or the private school won't do it?
So private schools don't typically, and again, these are your regular private schools. These aren't, we're talking, there's in the United States, there's a lot of non-public schools that are special education schools. That's
Okay.
not the conversation we're having. I'm saying you go to ABC private school, which is a lovely little private school in your area, but you're noticing issues and you feel like there might be a suspected disability, or you've received a medical diagnosis. So you know that there's a disability, but you feel like that your child can stay where they are, your school team is working with you, but you want to be able to have the protections afforded to you by federal law, 504, or Americans with Disabilities Act, IDEA. And so you can go to your local education agency, give them what you have, see if there's additional data that's warranted. And there's certain, for example, speech and language services, which are often common for children with
Yes.
communication disabilities. And you can, if the school team determines that your child is eligible to receive services, they would develop what's called a service plan. And you could go to your local education agency, your local school, and get those services either before the school day or after or during the school day, depending on your family situation.
Wow. That's really interesting. That's kind of a game changer.
It can be a game changer. A lot of families choose to
Oh.
keep their children in private school and access those supports.
Okay, Sherry, you are gold. Your knowledge is off the charts. This is amazing. I love it. I love that you're part of our group. Parents, Sherry's in our group. Post a question and tag her in it if you have it so that other people can see your question and benefit from her answer. So know that she's here. And if you want to reach out to her privately, I'm sure she would talk to you.
Yeah,
But
please do.
if you have some general questions, post them in the group and tag her so that everyone can benefit from your question.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me, Erin. I appreciate it.
Thank
Nice
you.
meeting everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Thank
Okay,
you.
goodbye.
Bye.